A large number of indie games exist as a response to a series either being dead or radically different. The phrase, "screw it, I'll do it myself," is apt. Look at a game like Crow Country, which is influenced by old PS1 survival horror games like Resident Evil, or how Zodiac is rising from the ashes of Star Fox. That's not to say these are ripoffs. Games like this have their own identity, but what they're looking to emulate is plain to see. And Color Gray's latest release, Veritus, is no different, wearing its Game Boy Zelda inspiration on its sleeve. There was some controversy, and by that I mean a few nettled Twitter users, over this post made by one of the devs, essentially putting modern open-world Zelda on blast while propping up his own game. Many saw this as unprofessional and disrespectful, and while I would never put down another game in order to promote my own, I can't say I disagree. Ever since Zelda went open world, I felt the series lost a lot of its charm, especially with the dungeons. So does Veritus remedy this? Somewhat. First things first, Veritus is actually the sequel to one of Color Gray's previous games, Prodigal. In full disclosure, I've yet to play Prodigal, so I'm no doubt missing some context regarding this game's story. However, I still managed to piece together the basics of what's going on. You play as Orin Grail, the protagonist of the previous game who carries with him the Dread Hand, a remnant of the slain god of shadow, Veritus. If you watch this game's intro, you'll see a cinematic play where King Regnier is killed by an assassin. We later learn they were working for a tyrant named Revillon, who quickly seizes the empty throne. Shortly afterwards, Orin receives a letter from a man named Crocodile, who's compiling a team of people to raid Castle Veritus. The plan? To seize the Blade of Veritus before Revillon can get her hands on it. Seems simple enough, but as we journey into this castle, we soon find out it's hiding a dark secret. That's the basics of what's going on, but if you're interested in learning the finer details, you may want to check out some of these books lying around. They explore some of the lore and are written from the perspective of different characters. I definitely recommend giving them a glance because otherwise you may find yourself a bit lost with what's going on. Characters will bring up names and concepts as if you already know what they are, and you'll just nod like, yeah, I get it, but you don't really get it. You're just being polite. Hit those books and take some notes. But that's only if you really care about the story. What about the gameplay? Veritus sets itself apart from Zelda, as well as its predecessor, by being all about the dungeons. There's no overworld to explore here, instead you take on dungeons one after the other, only taking a break at your camp in between. It's the classic dungeon fare. You'll fight enemies, find keys, and solve puzzles to progress through these labyrinths. There's also these little mini-game segments that pop up from time to time, like the swimming segments with Illy and the musical note parts with Yoru. These help spice things up and provide a nice change from the usual puzzle solving and enemy slaying. Speaking of, we don't have a sword, instead you're decked out with a pickaxe, and unfortunately, it only strikes what's directly in front of you. We're back to Zelda 1 here, folks. Thankfully, the range can be increased by crafting a new pick back at camp. You may have noticed yourself picking up things like leather hides and metal alloys during your journey. If you have a chat with the blue woman Yoru, she'll offer to take these materials and make you either a new pick or some new boots. But this crafting system isn't the most intuitive. You don't even know what these items are going to do. And you can't read the descriptions in the crafting menu. You have to go to your inventory to do that. And if you end up making something worse than what you have, you can't go back. You're stuck with what you made. Do yourself a favor and pull up the crafting guide someone made on Steam. Makes things so much easier. You're going to want the help too because this game can be quite challenging. You'll probably want to hit up the chef Sunny and have him cook something up for you using the ingredients you found in the dungeons. Again, check the guide to figure it out. The food he creates will give you a buff, but it'll only last until you die. That's why I made sure to have the Iron Gut enchantment equipped, which allows you to keep food after death. Enchantments being yet another thing you can acquire on your journey. Just visit Yoru to switch them out. Also, if you find yourself needing some ingredients, check out Zagel's shop. His inventory increases as the game goes on, so pop in frequently. But all that has to do with camp. What about these dungeons we're exploring? We reach Castle Veritus very early on, but find ourselves blocked by this door that requires 4 keystones to open. So we have to venture to different parts of the castle to progress, and these sections of the castle serve as our dungeons. We have a garden, a banquet hall, a library, sewers, and a forge. These are quite distinct from each other stylistically, and I think the devs did a good job when it came to decorating them to sell the theme. In fact, let me just say, I adore this game's whole Game Boy Color aesthetic. Obviously, it's meant to invoke the graphics of Link's Awakening and the Oracle games, and I think they did a tremendous job, while at the same time keeping their designs distinct and easy to read. It doesn't stick to the Game Boy limitations 100% though. Obviously, we're dealing with a wider aspect ratio, and I think there may be a few times where they cheat with the amount of colors on screen, but it still looks good all the same, so I can't really knock it. The music's good too, though I found the use of instrumentals a bit at odds with the game's look. When playing a retro-styled game, I expected retro-style music. Again, the tracks are well done, they just feel out of place, as do the little voices characters do when starting a dialogue. I know this might just be me being a bit pedantic, but Game Boy games can't have voice recordings like this. Not this clean, anyway. Again, it's a nitpick, and you can turn the voices off, but I still found it to clash with this game's old school look. While I'm whining, I do wish there was more variety in the enemies we faced. That's not to say this game doesn't have enough enemies, I counted 20 different kinds. No, my problem more so is that no matter what dungeon I was in, I was constantly fighting some of the same enemies over and over again. I don't think there's a single one that doesn't have zombies in it. It causes the dungeons to blend together, which would have been avoided had there been more enemies that were unique to their dungeons. Some do exist, like these big plants, but they're rare when compared to the constant zombies you'll face off against. Like, even something as simple as giving the enemies different outfits, or color schemes depending on the dungeon, would have gone a long way to help these areas stand out. I feel the same way about the puzzles. No matter the dungeon, you're going to be doing this block sliding button pushing puzzle. They do occasionally spice things up, like with these walls that shoot up, or these iron balls we can throw, but it wasn't quite enough for me. I do really like these forks we find at the banquet hall. You can throw them to create a grappling point. It's a different type of puzzle, and it's one that fits the theme of the area it's in. I wish the game had more like it. But I think the problem can be traced back to the fact that we're working with a limited number of items. We only get the two, the grappling hook and the dread hand, which lets us respawn at a room's entrance. Compared to your average Zelda item pool, it's pretty lacking. And hey, if they only wanted the game to have these, that's fine, but there's no denying it severely limits the kinds of puzzles you can throw at the player. That's not to say Veritus doesn't have things to give to the player. As mentioned, you get things like enchantments, medallions, and upgrade components. But all these items only serve a purpose when it comes to fighting enemies, unlike Zelda where items generally had a use in both combat and exploration. And while Veritus' system does allow a nice feeling of growth as you make your way through it, the puzzles do suffer. But in the same way, bosses benefit. There's a total of 10, and I'd say they're all at least good. Because you're able to greatly increase your capabilities in combat and sprint, these battles are allowed to be pretty fast-paced. They hit hard and hit fast. They're not all the same damage sponges either, thankfully. There's a good variety on display here. There's the plant boss, which functions more as an obstacle course before we're allowed to wail on its core. The wolf boss takes place on these sinking platforms. Stand on them too long and you'll fall into the water. This two-faced statue has us hit its hands and then throw them at the opposing side of its face. And then the final... Oh, right. I guess I should explain. If you've been reading the various books that you stumble upon, you may have seen mention of a special guest being kept in the castle. We come to learn that Veritus had an affinity for star watching, but one day he took notice of stars starting to disappear. This all culminated when a being of light crashed down from the skies and it began attacking frantically. With some help, Veritus managed to subdue the creature, but it proved too powerful to kill. As such, it was chained up and left in the very crater it created. In order to ensure its imprisonment and to keep the outside world safe, Veritus built his castle atop this creature of light. Years later, with Veritus now gone, we arrive at the very same castle to seek out the blade of Veritus. With the creature being constrained for so long, it's grown weak enough to kill, but unfortunately it manages to reach out to our party member Lacrima, informing her that it is a servant of Rain, the very same goddess Lacrima is sworn to serve as a Templar. So she stands before us, feeling it is her duty to protect this being. It's a fun fight, though I had this weird thing happen where my character started floating off the ground. Yeah, I don't think that's supposed to happen. After knocking some sense into Lacrima, we're finally able to get the blade we came here for and journey down into the crater. I should note that if you didn't help the blacksmith Hagen with crafting the dagger, then the game ends here and you get the bad ending. After one last pep talk from our party members, we come upon the final boss.
He's tied up! Jump his ass!
Honestly, just feels like bullying. But he eventually breaks out of his chains and starts letting out some dangerous attacks. I'm not even sure how to dodge some of these. I think you're supposed to use the dread hand to make yourself invulnerable in time, but I couldn't quite do it right. After doing enough damage, the creature has had enough and gives us the old double kebab. But the goddess Anatha, who's been watching over us all this time, calls out to her brother Veritus, begging him to fight. The traces of Veritus in us spring to life and envelop Auron as we grab the blade we came here for and enter this fight's second phase. Getting some Kirby's Adventure vibes here. This is pretty easy, just fly around avoiding the spears and swing away. Anatha can provide you with some healing too if you're getting low. Just keep slashing and eventually, you'll win. The castle sinks into the crater as Auron and the rest of the party watch on and celebrate, all except for Lacrima, who appears to be having a crisis of faith. It's then mentioned that although they won today, the party finds themselves having bounties placed on their heads, and they're now on the run from Revillon and the church. So will there be a sequel? Well, the game certainly alludes to there being more, and I hope there is because I really enjoyed my time with Veritus. It didn't provide me the complete classic Zelda experience I was hoping for, but the dungeons and characters were all still very charming. If you're interested, check it out on Steam. And make sure to look at Colorgrave's other games, Prodigal and their 2D platformer Curse Crackers. They're also working on a new game, Claire a la Mode, so give it a look. That's all for now. Have a nice night.